Hey Panthers, I'm Spencer bringing you week 5 of KJLS's Quarantine Home Edition. First up is Jean with another episode of Trend Review.
Hey there, I'm Jean and I'm this week's host for this episode of Media Review, the show in which we review books, music, and movies. Now today we're going to be doing something a little interesting. We won't be reviewing a movie, we will be reviewing a show called Cowboy Bebop, an anime TV series that ran from 1997 to 1998. This show is about 4 main characters: Spike Spiegel, a bounty hunter; Jet Black, a bounty hunter; Faye Valentine, a bounty hunter; and Ed, who's not a bounty hunter. They all meet up together on this huge ship, and they essentially collect bounties from space. Now keep in mind, this show is set in the year 2071, so everything's futuristic, but it's not the futuristic that you'd consider. It's very gloomy, it's polluted, it shows what could potentially happen if we abuse mechanics and if we pollute the Earth. And so they basically travel the planets and trying to collect bounties. And it's mostly a show that develops their characters rather than, try and create a one long arc about them collecting one bounty. It's multiple bounties. Every single episode has its own distinct theme or distinct character, and there is one overall narrative involving Spike Spiegel. And overall, this show is a 10 out of 10. It is 100% hand-drawn. There is almost no CGI. The characters are written well, the dialogue is written well. The English dub, because this is an anime, is done very well as well. And on top of that, they're making a live-action version which will come out on Netflix, but it has been delayed due to one of the actors injuring their wrist while on set. Now, onto the book. E.B. White's classic, The Trumpet of the Swan. Now, this is a story that follows Louis, a young trumpeter swan who is born dumb. And by dumb, I don't mean crazy in the head, like an anti-vaxxer, but I mean like he can't speak. His vocal cords, there's something wrong. But a trumpeter swan has to have mating calls in order to survive and pass on their DNA and have kids. But he can't use his voice to make calls, so his dad steals a trumpet for him, and he learns how to play it so then he can make calls. And it follows his misadventures around the East Coast. And this book is a great read for someone who's feeling down, because this shows that you can do anything no matter what your problems are. You can accomplish almost anything you want. And this book gets a solid 8 out of 10. There are a few inconsistencies and there are a few plot points in which I don't like. For example, there was a love interest that wasn't that interesting and they followed an entire subplot line of that. But this book is still great, and E.B. White is a great author. Now, onto the music. On last week's episode, we reviewed the 2018 year album, The Now Now. But we're gonna hop back to the 90s, in which they released a compilation album of hits from the 60s. From one specific guitarist that you probably know, or may not know, called Jimi Hendrix. Now, Jimi Hendrix is considered the greatest guitarist of all time. I mean, if you listen to any of his music, then you will figure out why. But you also might not, so let me explain. Jimi Hendrix was self-taught back in the 50s and 60s, and he was only around for 3 years before he accidentally died after involving an overdose. But essentially, he wrote 4 albums with a band called the Jimi Hendrix Experience. And so this is a compilation of their best hits. And it contains his hits such as Purple Haze, a cover of All Along the Watchtower, which is said to be one of the greatest covers of all time, Stone Free, Crosstown Traffic, Castles Made of Sand, all these great songs that you may or may not have previously heard. And so Jimi Hendrix was considered great because of his usage of the electric guitar at the time. He basically was extremely influential and made the guitar into what it is today. And so this album, it's great. It contains all of his hits. His hits are amazing. His lyrics are amazing. His wordplay, the drumming in the background, his guitar skills, his bass, everything is great. And I would highly recommend you listen to it over the break to find something new to listen to. Well, this has been Jean with the Media Show, Now back to the anchors.
Thanks. Now to Rianne with an outdoor update.
Hey Panthers, I'm Rianne from KJLS Panther Cast. Today, I set out on a bike ride around Palo Alto to give you an update on how things are going. First, I headed over to our school, JLS, via East Meadow Drive, which was relatively empty. I stopped by to read the front sign when I noticed a giant black gate in front of the breezeway. Although this always seems to be a visual barrier, because although I didn't catch this on camera, I did not see any kind of barrier near room 600, nor was the parking lot blocked. I then used the parking lot entrance as entryway into campus. The parking lot was empty except for one car. I saw some signs on the poles telling people to practice social distancing and what they can do to prevent the spread of germs. Speaking of poles, some new poles were put up in the lunch areas, as well as nearby the pool. I then left the JLS campus and entered Mitchell Park. I checked out the Mitchell Park Library and the community center area, all of which were closed. I then proceeded to Magical Bridge Playground, which was also closed. The park in general looked very empty. Then I headed over to another park, Group Park, which was mostly empty, same as Mitchell Park. Its skate park was closed, and it also closed off the water fountains. Finally, I headed over to the Baylands Trail, where some people were getting exercise, while maintaining a safe distance, of course. Its beauty is always there, regardless of the pandemic. That concludes my ride around Palo Alto. Hope you enjoyed this update. This has been Rianne from KJLS Panther Cast. Stay safe, Panthers.
Thank you. Now to Nathan with another episode of Wacky News.
Hey Panthers, I'm Nathan Kerner, and welcome to this week's installment of Weird and Wacky News. Last week, Wendy announced it would be giving out free chicken nuggets to anyone who came through the drive-thru on Friday. A man in Oregon decided to take full advantage of that by taking 4 hours to go to 11 Wendy's. Now, he's a stockpile of Wendy's chicken nuggets. A man in Colorado won the lottery twice on the same day. He's been playing the same numbers for 30 years, and he got the $1 million jackpot on the same day. A man in Quebec who spent $5,000 on a rock, paper, scissors tournament had his debt appealed by an appeal court. Apparently, larger bets can't be placed on games that are complete luck, so the debt was released. Police in India are taking this lockdown very seriously. That is why some of them are using 5-foot metal to grab people that are violating the rules of the shutdown. The Forces General of Police tweeted, "A unique way of tackling non-cooperating corona suspects and curfew breakers." An Indian man bought 28 tons of onions, which is about 90,000 onions, to disguise himself as an onion farmer to break quarantine. But he was caught by the police and sent back to his home. And finally, an MIT lab graduate has created a perfume that is meant to smell like humans. Its purpose is to remember what friends and loved ones smell like when you are not there. And that's it for this week's Weird and Wacky News. I'm Nathan Kerner, and until next time, stay safe.
Thanks. Now to Jonathan with online libraries.
Canopy is a movie and documentary database that can be accessed using a Palo Alto City library card. It's a great resource to watch some documentaries, cinema classics, courses from the great courses, and TV shows. Let's take a look at the selection.
With Canopy, the account holder is allowed up to 5 movies per month, with some exceptions, such as credit-free movies, documentaries, and classes from the great courses. In terms of the selections of shows and movies, Canopy is not providing the most current and popular movies and shows, but there are many independent movies and classics. These include The Italian Job and Murder on the Orient Express. Some documentaries include Being George Clooney, a great documentary on the world of dubbing movies and shows. I Learn America is another great documentary on immigrant teenagers learning to adapt to America at the International High School at Lafayette in New York. Canopy Kids allows unlimited access to great titles like Sesame Street, Dinosaur Train, Arthur, and Wildcrafts. Overall, I think Canopy is a great program with a large selection in many different genres, but I wish there would be a filter feature for length, genre, and rating. Canopy can be pretty overwhelming with row after row of titles. This can make it pretty daunting to find movies. Furthermore, the use of a popular category at the top of the page would be nice.
In summary, Canopy is a great resource for movies, documentaries, and other educational entertaining programs. It won't have the latest and greatest blockbuster, but you can expect to find some good movies and shows at your fingertips. This has been Jonathan from KJLS, now back to the anchor.
Thank you. Now to Emma on making masks during the quarantine.
Hey Panthers, I'm Emma from KJLS. I've noticed recently that lots of people have been looking into activities that allow them to disconnect and kill a lot of time. And considering the circumstances, I'm gonna share a tutorial to make your own face mask with stuff you can find at home. I'll be using a tutorial found on the New York Times, but keep in mind there are a lot of tutorials out there that need different materials, and this is just the one I've chosen. Additionally, you can potentially donate homemade masks to hospitals in need, although you'll have to make sure your masks meet their requirements. For more information, you can go onto the Needles Studio website, which is a local fabric store. If you navigate to their Making Masks page, you'll see a lot of helpful stuff, including a Google Doc that lists all hospitals that are accepting handmade masks with linked tutorials. So, without further ado, here's how to make a face mask from basic materials that are found at home. Starting with materials, it's best that you use tightly woven 100% cotton, much like the texture of bed sheets or dress shirts. In this case, I'll be using the cloth from my old mattress covers, but keep in mind old t-shirts work just as well. Along with that, you'll need a needle and thread or just a sewing machine, sewing pins, scissors, and a ruler. Start by cutting out 2 rectangles of fabric 9.5 inches wide and 6.5 inches tall. Then cut out 4 strips of fabric 18 inches long and 3/4 of an inch wide. These will be the ties that secure the mask to your head. Fold the 2 longest edges of these strips into the middle and pin them down. If you don't have sewing pins, you can always use safety pins, although they don't work too well. If it's all you have, it works fine. Then, after folding these strips halfway lengthwise, hand sew or use a sewing machine along the middle of the fabric, repeating this for all 4 pieces. And keep in mind this takes kind of a long time. Pin the short edges of the fabric ties to each of the 4 corners of one of the rectangular fabric layers. Make sure that the pattern side, or the outer facing side, is facing towards you. Place the other fabric rectangle on top of the first, this time with the inner side facing you. Then pin it into place. Sew along the edges of the rectangles, leaving a 1/4 inch space between the stitch and the edge. When sewing past the corners, make sure you sandwich the fabric ties in between the fabric, securing them in place and removing pins as you go. What's important here is that you don't sew all the way around. When you've come back to where you started, leave a 1.5 inch gap. Now, flip the piece completely inside out using this small gap. So now the edges are clean and the fabric ties are safely secured within the rectangle fabric layers. Make 3 staggered pleats along the long edge of the mask, pinning them into place and sewing a 1/4 of an inch away from the edge. We're almost done here, so bear with me. Finally, make a second round of stitches, but this time a 1/2 of an inch away from the edge. And that's pretty much it. Make sure you wash your fabric before and after making this to prevent shrinking, and have fun. This has been Emma, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks. Now to Roxana with 6 Foot Business.
Times are changing, and business owners are learning to adapt to the developing circumstances. For many companies, social distancing means closing up shop, while others remain open despite the coronavirus. So how do you define what's really helping your customers? In this news segment, we'll investigate how both large and local organizations have found ways to stay in the market and support their communities, all while maintaining a 6-foot business.
Hey Panthers, I'm Roxana from KJLS Panther Cast, and on this week's episode of 6 Foot Business, we're going to talk about how a retired elementary school English teacher has transitioned into doing online writing classes.
Hi, my name is Janet. I was a teacher in Palo Alto Unified for 34 years, mostly teaching kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade. And since I've retired, I do small group classes, private lessons for students in writing, and now I'm doing a little bit of online lessons, or trying to. When the other teachers started having to do online learning, I was jumping for joy saying, I don't have to do that, because they have to do something far more difficult than I do. They have to use different platforms, then they have to learn to use different things, and I'm kind of slow-witted at that sort of thing. How do you get that teacher contact and that feeling that you have in a classroom of a bunch of 7-year-olds compared to being with even one kid online or the whole class online. It's not the same thing. So people just kept asking me if I would do online lessons, and I finally said, okay, I'll give it a try. So I've been kind of tweaking how I do it. Like essay work works well on an online thing, but I'm doing creative writing too. One really bad side is the kids have to write on their own. And for kids who don't like to write or who will throw a temper tantrum or something like that, it doesn't work to have them do their homework at home. So it's just, then the kids don't get feedback from other kids when you're doing online lessons, and that's part of writing. But actually they learn a lot too. There's more personal interaction than I thought I would get out of not being there, but just being online. So it's better than I thought. I was very hesitant to do it. I really enjoy my online lessons because otherwise I don't get to see kids, and I'm so used to seeing kids. And I'm working with more older students when I'm doing my online lessons because they have to be able to use the computer and things like that. So normally my specialty is younger students. So it's fun to be able to get to know older kids in a different way. In fact, I had a first grader I was doing some online things with, and she spent the whole time drawing those faces, those little cartoon characters over the faces on FaceTime. So I'm part of the app of FaceTime. But I'm also going through and looking at all the old stuff that my kids have written. It's been fun to sort of go on this journey of student work and look back through. I get to go back through and reconnect with these students even in my head. So there's some good sides.
Thanks, Janet. If you're interested in Janet's writing classes, go to writewithjanet.com for more information. Although the transition into online learning has been difficult for many, we hope this video reminds you to look at all the new skills you've been improving throughout the process. From Menlo Park, this has been Roxana from KJLS, keeping a distance. Now back to the anchors.
Thanks for tuning in, Panthers. Stay safe, and we'll see you next week. This has been Spencer. Make it a great day or not. The choice is yours.